It has been quite some time since I've done a mailbag video, and with the offseason in a bit of a lull with the majority of free agency signings completed, I figured what better time than to bring a mailbag video back, as it's probably been a good 6 months since I've done one of these. So if you caught the community post and you left your questions in the comments, I greatly appreciate it. I'm going to try to get through as many as possible. So what's going on, everyone? You were listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Our first question comes to us from Doug LOL19. If the Bulls are done making moves and Lonzo is ready to go for the season, where would you rank the Bulls for next season? This is a good question. Honestly, I don't know that I can rank them that much higher from where they finished last season. Now, assuming they stay healthy, like you said, Lonzo's ready to go, they're still going to be a good team. I mean, we saw when the team was healthy with Lonzo, they were one of the best teams in the East. The problem, though, is the East has improved substantially from where they were last year, with so many teams in the East getting better. You had the Celtics adding Malcolm Brogdon, the Hawks added DeJounte Murray, the Bucks, Sixers, and Heat have all been able to keep their course so far anyway. The Knicks are trying to trade for Donovan Mitchell. They also acquired Jalen Brunson. So the East is going to be more competitive than it was last year. And the Bulls didn't really improve that much on paper. They're kind of relying on the health of the team and the hopes that they'll be able to still be at the top of the East. So to answer your question, assuming the Bulls are done making moves, but Lonzo is still ready to go to start the season, which I really hope he is, then I think the Bulls will likely finish with the 4th or 5th seed. I could see them pulling off being a 3 seed if everything goes right, guys are able to stay healthy, Patrick Williams takes that 3rd-year leap, and Vucevic shows to be a more consistent outside shooter. I do think the Bulls will finish with a better record than they had last season, though. Next, we've got Australia Duel Masters. How confident are you that Lonzo Ball will be good to go to start the season? Can you see Coby White being traded? If so, to which team, and what will we get in return? To be honest, I'm not really confident that Lonzo will be good to start the season. I mean, the season is still 3 months away, so it's a lot of time to continue to rehab and heal and quote-unquote progress, as the Bulls like to use when talking about his status. I have no idea what to expect at this point. All I know is it's been 6 months since the last time Lonzo Ball played in a game, and if the season were to start today, he would still not be ready. And that's concerning for your starting point guard who is only 24 years old, who, by the way, the Bulls desperately need, not only for his defense, but also his outside shooting and playmaking. This team is substantially better with Lonzo. I don't think anyone can deny that. As far as Coby getting traded, yes, I think he ultimately will be dealt. The Bulls just have too many guards. The front office is not going to choose Coby over Io. And the thing is, Coby is still a young player who might actually fetch some value. Which team could he go to? I mean, your guess is as good as mine. Probably more likely a team that is going to be rebuilding. I can see the Jazz if the Bulls try and make a run at Jordan Clarkson or Bogdanovic to add some shooting, but both of those are probably unlikely as well, as the Jazz are going to want more than just Coby White for either of those players, and the Bulls don't really have the draft capital to actually make a deal like that work anyway. Next, we've got David Flores. Which Chicago Bull, present or former, would you love to interview on your channel? Man, I mean, I don't know how you can't choose Michael Jordan here. Like, if I had the chance to interview the greatest player of all time, my idol growing up as a kid, the guy who got me into the game of basketball and made me a Bulls super fan, yeah, it would have to be Michael Jordan. That being said, though, MJ probably wouldn't be the best interviewer. Like, my gut tells me he probably wouldn't be the most fun person to interview, or maybe not the most friendly. So a guy that I would absolutely love to interview, who is another one of my favorite Bulls players of all time, is Joakim Noah. I would love to have him on the channel and pick his brain. I mean, if we're talking about past players too, there are a host of guys I would love to interview. Dennis Rodman, Scottie Pippen, although he's kind of fallen off his rocker recently, but maybe that would actually make the interview more fun. Kirk Heinrich, Tony Kukoc, Luol Deng, I mean, these are just to name a few. I have had the pleasure of interviewing 2 former Bulls, and Stacey King and Ronnie Brewer, and both of those guys were great to have on the channel, especially Stacey just because he's so loved across Bulls Nation. Next, we've got Barton Shaw. Do you agree with the Athletics ranking of Zach Lavine in their top 125 players list? Where would you place him? So, didn't see this ranking, and I guess I should have looked it up before answering the question, because I have questions. Was the ranking the top 125 players of all time, or just the top 125 players in the league currently? Because if it's all time, I mean, I love Zach, and maybe he can get there, but I don't think you can put him even in the top 200 players of all time when you look at the history of players throughout the NBA and what they've been able to do. Zach just made the playoffs for the first time in his career last season. Not saying that's his fault, because he's kind of always been on rebuilding teams, but those are the kind of things that are assessed when you're talking about all-time status. And again, he's only 27 and could likely get there at some point later in his career, being on a consistently winning team, one in which he's one of the better players on, and actually making some deep playoff runs as well. But Zach already being in the top 125 players of all time, no, he's just just not there yet. As for top 125 players in the league, I mean, that's just straight up disrespectful to be putting him in the top 125 unless he's in the top 30, but then why not just say the top 30 players in the league? But again, I didn't actually read the article or research it. If I had to rank Zach and where he stands among NBA players currently, I actually think he is a top 25 player. I think you could easily put him in the 19 to 22 range. He really is one of the best players in the league when you look at his body of work and what he brings relative to his competition. Next, we've got Bulls fan for life. This year, DeMar was our go-to guy and even our first option. Do you think Zach will take that role next season? And how big of a leap do you think our young players are going to get, like IOP, Will, and Coby? How will they do? So I don't know if I would say that Zach will take that role as the Bulls' go-to guy and number one option. I do think he probably should because DeMar is getting older. He's not going to be the future of this team while Lavine is. And so best to start now, especially when you have the supporting cast of older vets like you do in DeMar and Vucevic. But really, I see it being more of a complementary role in which both players will kind of defer to the other depending on who's having a hot night to be that go-to scorer and first option in clutch situations. Almost like a Kevin Durant and Steph Curry back in the day with the Warriors, not comparing those guys like for like at all because Durant and Curry are all-time greats and superstars, and we can't really say that about Zach and DeMar as much. More so using it as an example that both players can really feed off each other and both being those go-to options and more or less sharing that role of being the team leader. That's what I would suspect their roles would look like. As for the development of the Bulls' younger players, I do actually think that P. Will is going to take that big leap going into his third year. Again, health is going to be key because injuries robbed him of having a full training camp last season and missing most of the preseason to then getting injured at the beginning of the year and missing most of the year as a result. Like, this is the first time Patrick will have a full training camp, full preseason, hopefully, and now with 2 years under his belt and also knowing the importance of his role and him taking that next step being so critical for the Bulls' success. You would hope that that will motivate him enough to make that jump from year 2 to year 3. As for Ayo and Coby, it's hard to say because on one hand, I'm not even sure Coby is going to remain with the team. And for Ayo, well, I think the kid is only going to get better and better with the Bulls, the way that their backcourt is currently structured and then bringing in Goran Dragic and allegedly promising him minutes. I just don't know how much playing time Ayo is realistically going to get. And it's kind of hard to make a big jump from last season when you're not getting enough minutes. I guess it all kind of depends on the health of Lonzo Ball because if Lonzo is missing time again, then of course that's another opportunity for Ayo to step up. Next, we've got your range laugh now. Do you think the Bulls improved at all from last year? Here's the thing. I know there's been a lot of critique from Bulls fans and also just the NBA media at large that the Bulls didn't really do much to improve this roster, especially when you look at some of the moves other teams have made in the Eastern Conference. And while yes, that is true, you can't really say the Bulls got worse at the same time. I mean, aside from the fact that DeMar and Vooch are going to be a year older and maybe they take a step back, which I guess could happen, but we'll assume that won't be the case. But when you look at the moves that were made, the Bulls added Andre Drummond. Yes, not the player that he used to be, maybe not a player to get all excited about, but he's without a doubt an upgrade over Tristan Thompson and Tony Bradley. The Bulls signed Goran Dragic, who obviously is well past his prime, but you got him on a vet minimum deal, and he's an upgrade over Matt Thomas, who the Bulls let go. And the Bulls re-signed Derrick Jones Jr., who was the only free agent on the Bulls last year that actually wanted to keep around, outside of Zach Lavine, of course, as long as they could get DJJ on a cheap deal, which they did. They let Troy Brown Jr. go, Matt Thomas go, Tristan Thompson go, all players who weren't really contributing to the team anyway. I'm not saying they're going to be leaps and bounds better, although health is going to be a big differentiator in terms of how they perform compared to last year, but I don't think that the team will be worse by any means. I think they'll be marginally better with the moves that they made. Again, the key is going to be health of Lonzo Ball and, of course, Patrick Williams finally being able to play the whole season and taking that third-year leap. Kind of related, we've got this question from Chad Jenkins. What is the ceiling for the Chicago Bulls with their current roster? So assuming no additional moves are going to be made, I'm also going to assume the group is healthy. Zach Lavine is back to his normal self. Lonzo Ball is good to go. No issues with Alex Caruso or Patrick Williams. Basically a best case scenario health-wise. I think this team and their ceiling, like I said before, is a 3 seed, which I know to some may not sound so optimistic when you're talking about the best case scenario with this team, but the fact of the matter is, as I said before, the East got better. It's going to be more competitive than it was last year. You have the East champion Boston Celtics getting better with their offseason moves. The Heat are still a great team with their roster. The Sixers still have Embiid and Harden. They also rebuffed their roster around Harden, given the fact that he's going to be taking a discount. Still have the Milwaukee Bucks. You can't rule them out. I still think that they would have come out of the East had Chris Middleton not gotten injured. They still have the best player in basketball in Giannis Antetokounmpo. Like, it's not going to be an easy task for the Bulls to finish top 3 in the East. As far as their ceiling in terms of a playoff run, I think at best you're looking at a conference finals exit. And it's for all the reasons I just mentioned about the rest of the teams in the East and the fact of the matter that the Bulls haven't really addressed two of their biggest weaknesses, being rim protection and shooting. Next up, we've got Malik JC. If the Bulls had Ben Gordon instead of Keith Bogans in 2011, do they have enough to squeak by the Heat in 7 games? That's an interesting question. I mean, I don't know if Ben Gordon would have really been the difference maker. Obviously a better player than Keith Bogans, but Gordon also took the ball out of Rose's hands and didn't maximize his potential. So sure, Gordon on that 2011 team would have made the Bulls marginally better, but I've also said at the end of the day, as good as the Bulls team was, I don't think they were experienced enough and ready to take out that Heat team with LeBron, Wade, and Bosh in a 7-game series. Both Rose and Noah were very young players at the time with little playoff experience. Tom Thibodeau was still a first-time head coach. Boozer was their best veteran player on that team, but Boozer also took a step back once he joined the Bulls. The Bulls had their depth with that great bench mob with guys like Taj Gibson, Ronnie Brewer, and CJ Watson, but again, not enough star power to match what the Heat had. That being said, I do think the Bulls would have been able to take out the Heat in 2012 had Rose not gotten injured. I think they were primed and ready and knew what it would take to make a title run having another year together under their belt. But of course, we all know what happened, unfortunately. But to answer your question, no, I don't think Ben Gordon would have enabled the Bulls to take out the Heat in 7 games alone. Next, we've got Oliver Wintersteiger. If the Bulls could only make one trade for one player this offseason, who would you trade for realistic? I like that you added in realistic there because sometimes I think Bulls fans get way too ahead of themselves and think we can just trade for whoever we want. I mean, based on what's available, what's realistic given the assets the Bulls currently have, honestly, it's hard to say because a lot of it depends on how much you have to give up in a given trade. Like, I think Richaun Holmes would be a nice trade pickup if it meant you only had to give up Coby White as a result or, say, a second-round pick. Could you get Holmes for something like that? Well, salary-wise, you might have to finagle some things a bit, probably throw in Tony Bradley, but that's whatever. I think Holmes would be a nice piece. Give us some size. He's a pretty decent shot blocker and rim protector. He's also a solid rebounder and a good finisher in the paint. Not saying he would be a game changer for us, but it's a realistic target that would provide a need for the Bulls off the bench for some depth of the 4 or 5. Honestly, though, if there was one guy that I really wanted in the Bulls, but it probably was more on the unrealistic side, but definitely isn't out of the realm of possibility, and this also assumes he can actually play the 4, even though he's traditionally been a center for most of his career, and that's Miles Turner. Turner has been in trade rumors really for the better part of the last 3 years. Why the Pacers just haven't pulled the trigger by now is beyond me when they've continued to talk about it for years. He's an elite shot blocker, one of the best in the league. You talk about the Bulls needing rim protection, you would have it right there with Turner. He's a decent enough outside shooter that wouldn't necessarily clog up the paint, unlike other high-level rim protectors in the league who don't have that in their repertoire. A decent scorer in the paint, especially on second chance putbacks. Like, Miles Turner would really elevate this team in terms of adding the requisite front court defense the Bulls need. He gives some additional scoring, additional rebounding. The main drawback is it would diminish Patrick Williams' role as he would likely come off the bench, which you hate to see when you want there to be a focus on his development. And can Miles Turner play the 4? Because he's not going to start over Vucevic. Turner would really have to accept a new role playing out of his usual position, which calls into question, would he still be able to provide the same level of elite shot blocking as a power forward? I don't see why he can't, but you never know, as some players are very stuck in their role and have a hard time adjusting to new ones. But really, the main reason I think a trade like this is unrealistic is because the Bulls don't have the trade assets to actually make a move for him, given the Pacers are going to want a lot in return for him in the form of draft picks and young players. Next, we've got Gavin. I was born in 2000, so I never got to see Michael Jordan play live on TV or anything. How did it feel being a Bulls fan when he was on the team? Well, first of all, enjoy your youth, my man. I would give anything to go back to my early 20s, but honestly, I wish I was a little older when watching Michael Jordan, because I don't think I truly appreciated witnessing the greatest player to ever do it and to be playing on my favorite team. I also think young Bulls fans at the time took it for granted because we got so used to seeing our team be on the top that we didn't know what it was like to experience the pain of losing, since that's all that we knew, right? I've said it before, my earliest memories following basketball was witnessing the Bulls title run in '92. So as a kid, seeing the Bulls win titles, that was all that I knew. And I didn't expect anything less. When Jordan retired for the first time to go play baseball, I was beside myself in disbelief, thinking there was no way the Bulls could lose. They're the best team and always will be. Anyway, watching Jordan in his prime was incredible, and seeing the Bulls dominate the league throughout the 90s were some of the greatest childhood memories of mine. I just wish, like I said, I was a little older to appreciate it more with the knowledge and study I have of the game now, because it's not every day you get to witness a generational talent like Michael Jordan, especially seeing a generational talent play on your favorite team. Anyway, guys, I'm going to end it there. Apologies if I wasn't able to get to your question. I'll try and have more of these mailbags as news slows down a bit in the offseason. Until then, guys, as always, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.